right, guys, welcome back. I'm excited to introduce the next speaker. His name is Simon Shawcross, and he is the co-author of The One Diet. He's also a high-intensity personal trainer, a weight loss coach, and a well-being expert. And I had the pleasure of chatting with him a few minutes ago, and can't wait to hear more about his speech. So please help me welcome Simon.
Thank you, Robbie. Welcome back to this afternoon session. I'm going to be talking to you today about having a balanced life. It's going to be about stress, nutrition, and exercise component as well. We're going to look to get all of those in. If you have any questions, and I know the Q&A at the end is quite short today, you can get me on Twitter, put the hashtag T21C, and I'll do my best over the next few days to answer any questions you have. So a little bit more about me. As Robbie just said, I'm a personal trainer focusing on the HIT approach, high-intensity training, working with people typically 20 minutes once or twice a week. I'm a nutrition consultant, and out of that has come the writing of The One Diet, which is a evolutionarily based approach to nutrition. I assume some of you in the audience are aware of that approach to nutrition at the moment. And I'm a well-being evangelist. As you can see, I take my role as that pretty seriously. So, why am I here today? What we're going to cover is stress and its effects on the mind and body, and nutrition, the benefits of eating well, and then the exercise component, fitness and recreation, and how to build those into your life. So the overarching approach is how to have a balanced life where you can perform at your best in everything you do in your life. The outcomes I'd like to achieve today is showing you how to improve your ability to cope with stressful situations, how to manage and improve your energy levels, and that's through psychological approaches, it's through nutritional approaches, and it's through a sensible approach to exercise. How to keep yourself strong and healthy in general, and a greater understanding of how to care for yourself as individuals. In our working lives, in fact, in all our lives, in our approach to dating, I know this conference is focused on dating as well, we need to be fit for purpose, and that means our knowledge and our skill set, the skills that we have to use to get our needs met in this life are really important. And what's equally as important is if we want to perform optimally using those skills, is we need to be fit for purpose in terms of our physical and mental well-being. So it's only when we can perform our best, when we're in the zone, when we have that state of flow, that we can actually get the most out of those skill sets we've built up over time. Does anybody here have a problem with selfishness? I know Yaron Brook spoke this morning. This is all about being selfish, looking after yourself. Even if you were to say, oh, you know, I really enjoy helping other people, which is a great thing to do, and give it, and I'd say give as much of yourself away as you can, but first and foremost, look after yourself. Be selfish. Take care of number one first, and then you'll be able to take care of business, you'll be able to take care of everybody else around you. Is everybody clear with what we're going to talk about today? Are there any questions so far or suggestions as to any of those areas you'd like me to particularly focus on? If not, I'll carry straight on with the first section, which is stress. There are three main causes of stress and distress in our lives. And the first one is change. When we have a situation which is causing us to become aware of circumstances that we're not used to, that can create a stress response in us. If somebody's not used to approaching women, that situation can be stressful. If you lose your job, that situation can be stressful. And what I would say is have an open mind towards change, because change is inevitable in all our lives. It's going to happen. And the more open and receptive you are to change, the more free-flowing and able you'll be able to cope with anything that life throws your way. So, for instance, if you were to lose your job, some people could look at that in a very negative way and get upset about it and get into a state of depression, whereas what I would encourage you to do is look at that as an opportunity. It's an advantage for you. You've now been given a whole lot of freedom to take your lives in the direction you want them to go in. Second cause of stress typically is increased demands. When we have greater demands put on us, and in the workplace that might be it's coming up Friday afternoon and you're suddenly told you've got to get this project finished tonight. Client needs it by the end of working day today. Suddenly the demands on you have dramatically increased. And if you're in a state where you've been looking after yourself, building up to that, you will be able to perform optimally still, even under those circumstances. However, somebody who's not good at managing their stress or looking after themselves is going to feel that, and they will run themselves, unfortunately, into the ground over time. And the third major cause of stress is decreased resources. Again, if we look at the workplace, a friend of mine recently is working for a company and he lost his PA. Suddenly he's expected to do all the work that his PA was doing for him in addition to the most important parts of his role. Now that's adding a lot of stress to him, and luckily I was able to show him some techniques that enabled him to get through that. Is everybody aware that there is both positive and negative stress? Anybody? Have you heard of both of those? Excellent. Well, if we look at stress as a curve, stress can be like a really positive thing, because when we're put under pressure, we start to perform optimally up to this state of eustress, which means performing at your best. If we have nothing going on in our lives, we're going to be down here, we're going to be bored, we're going to be tired. When we move up, taking appropriate goals on board, we're going to have excitement, we're going to have fun, and we're going to have pleasure in our lives. However, if we remain in that state for too long, we go over a tipping point, and the stress starts to get to us. And we're going to, at this point here at the top, just past our best and not quite perform as well as we can do. If we keep going, which can be a strong tendency for some people, I know for myself, I can be sitting at the laptop writing, and I will just find myself writing and writing and writing. And after a while, what happens is I suddenly find I'm researching something completely unrelated to the subject that I'm studying. And I'll spend maybe an hour lost in that space. Whereas if I'd have gone, okay, at this point, I'm starting to get distracted. Let's take a break. Let's take that 10, 15, 20 minutes and go for a walk, get some fresh air, meditate, take it easy. I will come back in 20 minutes' time, and I will be back probably around about down here, ready to ramp back up into this place. And I can eke more out of my working day by doing that. Some people, unfortunately, continue way past this into a state where they've run themselves down into the ground and are unable to perform anywhere near optimally. In fact, they may well be making themselves sick, opening themselves up to catching bugs, flus, and generally being unwell and not at their best. So what I would encourage you to do is to stay in this zone around about here. And when you find yourself peaking over there, do the kind thing for yourself. Bring yourself back down to here and ramp back up again. Manifestations of stress. If we're on that far left-hand side of the curve, as it was, and we have insufficient stress, our lives are unfortunately going to be filled, because the mind abhors a vacuum, they're going to be filled with boredom and frustration and lack of stimulation and challenge. When we have optimal stress, we have that manageable balance. And again, if we go beyond that onto the far right-hand side of that curve, we've got distress, ill health, breakdown and mental crises, and overcompensation. Not a place any of us want to spend too much time. Some of the symptoms of stress up there, I'm sure everybody can relate to at least a few in there. The solutions. The very first solution is awareness. It is about catching yourself at that place just before you push yourself too much and go too far. And it's a skill that's quite a challenge to develop. But the more in tune you are with your body, the more you eat well, the more you approach exercise from a sensible perspective, the more you're aware of your surroundings and how you feel and how you're interacting with others around you, will increase your degree of awareness as to your performance. And I would say, when you become aware of yourself starting to dip, take yourself away, give yourself some time for yourself. And there are many, many ways that you can look after yourself. And here are some of them. Physical relaxation. So that could be anything gentle, whether you want to go to the park and play some frisbee, whether you enjoy something very slow, very controlled like Tai Chi, whether you do some yoga. I would say high-intensity training is a little bit different from that because high-intensity training is a strong stressor to the body. What it will do, high-intensity training, we'll talk a little bit more about that later, is create a hormonal balance in you over time so long as you don't overtrain, where you'll actually have more energy and more in the muscles to give. But maybe find some ways you can physically relax, whether it's grabbing the bike, going out for a 10-minute bike ride. What I do for myself is I really enjoy walking. I enjoy the parks around London. I'll get out. If I have 20 minutes, I'll take a 20-minute walk and just observe nature. I'll breathe. I'll observe people around me. And I'll let all thoughts go out of my head relating to work and any areas of my life that may be causing me stress. There are times when it's just essential to switch off. Breathing techniques we'll go on to. Mental relaxation we'll go on to as well. Power napping, I'll just say a little bit about it because it's the guy's taking a nice power nap there on the slide. You only need to take 5-10 minutes to just sit with yourself, close your eyes, find somewhere you can be at rest, at ease, in comfort, where people aren't going to disturb you, maybe even put some headphones on, even if there's nothing playing, so that people think, oh, you know, he's otherwise engaged right now. Close your eyes and just take that time. A 10 minutes power nap in the mid-afternoon for me, or a meditation, means that I can be as productive in the afternoon as I was in the morning. It really does prolong my working efficiency and effectiveness by about 2, maybe even 3 hours. And it can only be 10 to 20 minutes of rest. Breathing is absolutely essential. And it's one of those things that we're all doing right now. However, many people, especially when they're under a degree of stress, are not aware of how their breathing patterns are. And what can happen is we begin to do shallow breathing, where it's just into the chest. So you're only filling about a half of your lungs with the potential oxygen that they could be taking in. And when you're doing that, you're depriving the brain and the body of oxygen, and you're putting yourself physiologically into a stress state by default. It's almost like stress is breeding more stress. Correct breathing provides energy, it drives the nervous system, is the key to relaxation, any form of relaxation. Breathing is the key. It can alleviate high blood pressure, and virtually every health condition and human activity is improved by effective breathing. So if we don't know how to breathe properly, or can I just get a show of hands as to people who have been aware of their breathing or are aware of their breathing, or people who have never given that a consideration? Okay, that's great to see. Quite a few hands going up there. And the key to breathing effectively is to breathe down into the belly. You're obviously not breathing into the stomach, you're breathing down into the deep lungs. But what ought to happen when you're breathing correctly, if I put my hands here, is the stomach expands. Often what you'll see with people who are in a stress state is they're breathing, and when they breathe in, the chest goes out, but they're not breathing right down here. When you breathe correctly, the stomach will relax and allow more space for the lungs to take in a greater amount of oxygen. Doing that alone, when you know you've got a presentation to give, when you know you're going to approach somebody for the first time, doing that kind of breathing for 2 or 3 minutes before that you engage in that can be really helpful and really beneficial to allow you to be just in that really relaxed state where you're in flow, where the best part of your personality is going to shine and come out. And you'll just get to enjoy that experience more by doing that. Okay, solution 4 is one I am a big fan of, and it's meditation. And it took me till I got into my 30s to really appreciate that meditation was a beneficial thing to be doing. Before that, I kind of had this perspective of it as a really esoteric, sitting cross-legged, much like this lady is here, on a mountaintop somewhere, becoming some monk-type figure. Meditation doesn't need to be like that. If that approach works for you, fantastic. Go ahead and engage with it. What works for me is just simply sitting in a comfortable chair, closing my eyes, and focusing on my breathing. What will happen if you're not used to doing that or you're not used to sitting still is that thoughts will come racing into your head. You know, oh, I've got to phone my girlfriend later, I've got to do that for my boss, I've got to get this organized. All of those things will attempt to come into your mind space during your meditation. If they do, that's completely fine. Allow that to happen, but also do not grasp onto them. Let them go at the same time. So if a thought comes into your head, let it come in and let it go out without attaching with it, without engaging with it whatsoever. Otherwise, you're just spending time daydreaming or thinking still, and those two states will ultimately exhaust you. What you need to do is just focus on your breathing. And when I started off meditating for 2 minutes at a time. And it was awesome that I could sit still for that long at that point because I was so physically active and energetic to keep moving that I found that a huge challenge. Other people might be fine, and for the very first time they do it, they might sit down, close their eyes, 20 minutes goes by, and they feel at ease and comfortable with doing it. So what I would suggest is if you're going to begin to use meditation, do it for between 2 and 5 minutes to start off with, and over a period of days and weeks, build it up. I have an approach that I've taken for the last 2 years, which is I meditate for 24 minutes a day, 1 minute for each hour of the day. And I'll do it usually mid-afternoon, and I'll take a seat, focus on my breathing, and again, when I come out of that, state-wise, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to give my afternoon, my evening, everything that I'm capable of. So if there are any people who've been skeptical about meditation in the past, there's loads of great research on it, and it does a lot for you, both physically, physiologically, and psychologically and mentally. It will put you at your best. And I'd encourage you, if you are a skeptic, to go and have a look at some of the research that's been done on meditation. I can point you towards some if you're interested in that afterwards. And it is one of those things that I have made now a discipline in my life, like brushing my teeth, like doing my high-intensity exercise. It's one of those things that is an essential discipline, and I wouldn't want to have to live without that. Another solution to stress. We're going to move slightly more onto the psychological approaches to stress now. And first of all, do you remember the first stressor we said, the first condition that causes stress is change for most people? And having a positive attitude to change is essential. It is the one thing, as I think I said earlier, that is inevitable in our lives. If you're opposed to change, you're going to get left behind. In fact, the only time we don't change in our lives is when we're dead. So be prepared for a lot of change in your lives up to that point. And fostering a positive attitude to change, dealing with circumstances as they arise and learning to know that you are going to be okay, you are going to be able to deal with this is really important. That moves on to positive thinking, which is easier said than done in some ways, because we can be caught up in our own subconscious psychological beliefs about ourselves, and they may hold us back from having a positive attitude at times, particularly when we're under stress. It's when we're under stress that the worst side of our characters will often come out. You know, we might get grouchy, we might get grumpy, we might get aggressive, some people get manipulative, and it's important, if you catch yourself going to that place, to keep positive, to keep thinking about what you can provide, what you can do for yourself, and what you can provide other people. Positive self-talk is something that is covered in a lot of sort of self-help psychological books, and I would encourage people to do it and to give yourself some positive affirmations. The thing I would say with positive affirmations is that they can be really dangerous if you don't actually believe in them. So just saying to yourself, I am fantastic with women, if you genuinely don't believe that about yourself, is not going to help you, because the mind will see a distance between what you're trying to tell it and reality. So in those circumstances, what I would do is pick an occasion in your mind where you have been effective at doing something. So let's say it's, I can approach women on the street. And you've had an example where you have done that in your life in the past. Pick that example and say, I can do that. So you're visualizing a successful moment that you've previously had in your mind from your past. Then a positive affirmation will be rooted to reality in your mind, and it can be beneficial. And that repetition creates that same state that you had at that point in the past. I'm not afraid to say that I really believe in mentoring. And if you can not relate to my success, the guy who's my mentor was working with somebody who is, 2 years ago, was completely unemployed. And in the last 6 months, they have won a BAFTA. So they went from being unemployed to having a BAFTA award, which is a pretty big deal. I would encourage all of us at some times need an outside perspective. It's really good to be able to be self-motivated, self-driven. At times we need that outside perspective that will give us, okay, if I just change this angle a little bit here and move in that direction, I can get to that place. Having a good mentor can be something that really drives your life forward in a new direction that your own mind may not have been able to take it in, at least at that time or at this time. So that's something that I encourage you to look into. Solution 6. I'm a really big fan of goal setting. For any area of your life that you consider important, set goals. Set your first important priority. What is it I'm looking to achieve in this sphere? What do I want to have happen? And make those goals time-bound. Now, luckily, my co-author with the One Diet has written a book called Change Directions, which I would encourage you all to read, which is a goal-setting process that covers goal setting from every single angle. The mind doesn't work particularly well when it isn't effectively directed. If it doesn't know what it's going for, it will just grab what's near, what's available, what's easy, what's convenient. If you genuinely want to drive yourself forward, you need to set a stretch goal. I would say don't make those goals unrealistic to start off with. Saying if you're living in a bedsit and saying, I want to be a millionaire by next year, that could be a valid goal, but have some structure to that to back that up, the direction you're going to take. Drill down in all your goal settings so you really know what approaches it is, where you're going, what you want to have happen. If you do that, the likelihood of that goal coming true for you is far greater. And when I first read the manuscript of Change Directions, which was about 3 years ago, I said my goal was I want to write a book, and a year and a half later that had happened for me. So set a goal for everything important in your life. It can seem a bit of a challenge at times to have to sit down and go through that process, but if it's important enough, make it happen. Time management is another area that can help minimize or allow you to stay in control of your stress. And there's just some really simple tips up there. Make lists. I'd be pretty lost without a list. I make a list pretty much the last thing before I go to sleep at night. And when I get up first thing in the morning, I know, okay, that's number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Other things may come up in the day, and I might have to make some phone calls I wasn't expecting to make, and it throws it off a little bit. But in general, I'm moving in the right direction. And without that list, I wouldn't be as productive as I can be. Work efficiently, and that goes back to that Laffer curve we saw earlier. Make sure you stay in your optimum state of energy and focus, and if you find yourself tipping over that, you're starting to look at those YouTube vids for too long and you're getting distracted from the work in hand that you're looking to do, take yourself away. Do something that's going to refresh you rather than drain more energy out of you. Always be decisive. If a decision doesn't need to be made, say, okay, it's out of here for now. That's not something I need to focus on. But in any decision that you do need to take action on, make it quick. And I'd rather make 100 mistakes than sit there festering, being concerned about a mistake I might potentially make. I'd rather clock up those mistakes and move forward in my life. And that makes things easier. Don't be afraid to ask for help. You know, if you need help, part of being strong is being able to open up and ask for that support, ask for that help. And I find when you do that, you are encouraging people into your life, you're encouraging energy into your life, things that will, again, lift you up and take you forward. Utilize dead time. Just make the most of the time you have available to you. If you're going to rest, if you're going to take it easy, say, I'm setting aside this time to rest now. And it's 2 hours, it's 3 hours, it's half an hour, whatever it is, and stick to that. And then come back and get focused on what you're doing again. Prioritize, that goes back with writing lists, really. Focus on what is the first important priority, what is most important for me to be doing with my day-to-day, what is going to create the greatest change or the greatest move forward in my life. Take regular breaks. I think that you can work for between, it depends on the individual a little bit, but between 30 and 40 minutes in one shot you can work really effectively for. After that point, it would be a good idea to take anything between a 5 and 10 minute break and then start another round, another cycle of 20 to 40 minutes of focused work. You'll get far more done than sitting there stewing, trying to come up with stuff when it's not flowing. Be prepared. Delegate. I'm a big fan of delegation. Whenever you've got roles, little bits and pieces that you know are not massive priorities to you, if you know people around you who can do that or that is their skill set, hand that stuff over to them and have a reciprocal arrangement with them so they can hand over stuff that's more in line with what you do when it comes to that. Learn to multitask as well. I mean, it's a joke that guys don't multitask, but actually most of the guys I know are capable of multitasking. Have a few things on the go at any one time. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. We're going to move on now to more behavioral patterns and how to approach interpersonal relationships. And this is part of a much bigger course, but I'm just going to focus on the positive today rather than run you through the negative stances that some people can take, particularly when we're under stress or pressure. So the assertive stance, which is the stance we're looking to take in our lives in general, means as an individual that you're fair and just in your interactions with other people. You know, you're not looking to get one over on people. If somebody's looking to abuse you, you put a halt to it very quickly. But in dealing with people who are reasonable people, always aim to be fair and just. Negotiate workable solutions with people around you rather than just bashing heads. Find the common ground and see what you're able to get out of that relationship rather than just cutting it off before maybe you've necessarily extracted all the benefits you could have done from that relationship. There are times when you do need to be able to take personal decisions unaided by others. And that doesn't take away from the point I made about mentoring earlier. What it means is there's a lot of your life when you need to have that ability to make a quick decision. And as I said earlier, again, I'd rather clock up mistakes and learn to be decisive in that process than hope for perfection and put off making decisions. Obviously, avoid being fearful of expressing your personal needs and emotions. Some people can hold that stuff back, and what it's going to do is just eat and eat and eat away inside of you until you're going to explode in some manner, whether it's physically or psychologically. The key thing to do is learn to become comfortable with expressing those feelings, those emotions, particularly with the people who are close to you in your life, the people who you consider important in your life. If stressful situations of conflict do arise, learn to remain calm. Remember that breathing technique. Focus again in on your breathing. Stay in that state where you're not going to be the one who flies off the handle. You're actually going to be the one who can steer this situation in the direction that you want it to go in. Again, always that respect for others, even in those circumstances. And a mindset that my mentor passed on to me, which I really have found very beneficial, is to never look at yourself as less than anybody else, and so inferior, and never look at yourself as superior to anyone else. We are all equals. We just have different skill sets, different abilities, and we're at different stages in our lives and our development. Everybody, however, is equal, and I look at everybody as equal, and I find that a very beneficial mindset to carry around. Taking that assertive stance into negotiation situations, again, it's that focus, it's about learning to act now rather than delaying things and putting them off till tomorrow, or getting stuck in a decision-making process in your mind where you're just stuck in that loop and it's going around and around again. Make a decision, take an action. If you need to, roll a dice. 1 and 3, I'm going to do it. 4 to 6, I'm not going to do it. At least that will create forward movement for you. Stay focused and controlled. I'm just going to run through these quickly because a lot of them relate to the previous slide as well. Be direct and specific when you're talking with people. Get across the message you want to get across. Be certain of your facts. If you're going to state something as a fact, be sure that you're right, because you don't really want to end up with egg on your face later on. And that would degrade you in terms of the other person's or the other people's opinion of you. Be polite, courteous, be persistent. If there are people getting in the way of your goals, of what you want to achieve, stay focused, stay strong, and stay persistent in getting your needs met. Avoid harboring grudges. If somebody's in your life and they're not working, if you're not for me, you're against me. And if you're against me, I don't need you in my life. So cut out the dead wood. That can be a challenge to do to start off with, but really, by allowing your mind to focus on and have those people in your life, they're taking up a space that could be filled with people who could be a lot more beneficial to your life. And just holding on to relationships, friendships that aren't serving you is actually not going to just keep you in the same place. it's going to hold you back and pull you down. Don't get sidetracked from where you want to go, and never grovel or apologize. You are who you are. If you make mistakes, you can admit to those mistakes, but you don't have to apologize for your behavior in those circumstances. Here's another tip, and it goes back to that superiority thing or inferiority thing, is avoid judging both yourself and others. And that can be a really challenging thing to do to start off with. What you may notice about yourself is when you're observing people or you're meeting people for the first time, you might hear a negative statement in your mind about that person. Unfortunately, all judgment and criticism is self-judgment. You're judging a part of yourself in that other person. That's the way the mind works. And if you can avoid that happening, if you can retrain your mind, the way I did it to start off with about 10 years ago now was that any time I had a negative impression about somebody, I had to come up with 2 positive statements in my mind immediately after that negative statement to correct it. Your mind gets pretty bloody tired of doing that if you have to keep doing it. It's a great way to retrain your perspective. And we'll move on. There are some words in language that we either use verbally or in our minds that are really toxic to our progress. And they're words that I would encourage you to look to avoid using. So don't, ought, should, must, but, try, wish, and hope are words that are of no benefit to you whatsoever. I can have hope for somebody else because I can't control that. It's outside of my control. But I never hope for something for myself. If I want it to happen, I want it to happen. And I would do my best to make it happen, but I'm not going to hope for it. It's like saying, I'm going to try high-intensity training. If you prompt your mind with that suggestion that you're going to try something, that's all it's going to do. It's going to try, and try is a very weak word. Whereas if you say, I am going to do it, you're giving your mind a direct instruction. The issue with words like don't is the mind doesn't work particularly well with negatives. So if you say, I don't want that to happen, all the mind is really hearing is, I want that to happen. You're setting yourself up for something that you don't want to have happen to happen. We could go into loads more detail about this, but for today, I just want you to be aware that there are words that some of you may or may not be using, and cleaning up your language can be of great benefit. Okay, so we're going to move on to the nutritional aspect of the talk now. And nutrition relates to stress because when you're feeding your body well and correctly, you're providing your body with more energy, more usable energy, and perhaps even more importantly, you're providing it or avoiding providing it with anti-nutrients, which are going to slow you down, make yourself slipping into that stressful state far more easy to happen. The book that I co-authored, The One Diet, comes at nutrition from an evolutionary approach. And I assume that some people in here are aware of paleo evolutionary approach to nutrition. Can I see a show of hands for people who are aware of that approach? And people who are currently engaging with that approach as well. Okay. So from about 3 million years ago to today as a species, to about 10,000 years ago, which is about 99.6% of our development and our DNA's development, our diet consisted of meats, seafoods, fresh fruits, and fresh vegetables. Those really are the foods our bodies are designed to thrive and perform at their optimum on. Conversely, nowadays, cheap ingredients are undermining our health. The more we've become removed from a food chain and awareness of how food is produced and what food can do for us, the more ingredients are slipped into our diets that are of no benefit and no help to us whatsoever. And primarily, those are rapidly digested carbohydrates, grains, sugars, and sweeteners, which are pretty much prevalent in anything that comes pre-boxed in a package. That stuff is loaded with cheap ingredients, which makes a lot of sense for the manufacturers because they can sell something with a high profit margin. Unfortunately, it's doing us as a society and as individuals, even more importantly, a disservice. And you have an issue which is of greater importance in the States, but is creeping into our food here. Chemically altered sweeteners like high fructose corn syrup, which from an evolutionary standpoint we have no experience of, our bodies do not know how to handle, and they've been in the food chain for just 20 years. Tiny, tiny amount of time. This is a quote from Lauren Cordain, who wrote probably the first book on paleo nutrition, or the first one in our era at the moment. And it says, generally, in most parts of the world, whenever cereal-based diets were first adopted as a staple food, replacing the primarily animal-based diets of hunter-gatherers, there was a characteristic reduction in stature, an increase in infant mortality, a reduction in lifespan, and increased incidence of infectious diseases. Cereal grains are packed full of anti-nutrients, things like gluten, things that cause our body major dysfunction. And in terms of physiological stress, they're keeping us in a state of inflammation. We're not going to be able to perform at our best if we're taking in a lot of this kind of stuff. Now, some of us may have metabolisms which can deal with this more efficiently than others. However, you're still not providing your body with the best energy if you're regularly taking on foods like that. Modern fats, vegetable oils are to be avoided. That includes margarine, fat, shortening, anything that's been tampered with. Hydrogenated fats, we've been through some ridiculous chemical process to produce that fat, is not going to be of any help to your physiology whatsoever. So avoid oils made from vegetables, grains, and seeds. There are exceptions. Unrefined virgin coconut oil and olive oil are acceptable fats. I'd rather the coconut oil because it's a saturated fat rather than the olive oil. But both are acceptable and aren't going to cause dysfunction to our bodies. Saturated fats, I'm just going to pop this up here quickly. Have been maligned by science, by the media for a long time now. They are not an issue. About 70% of my diet is saturated fat. 60 to 70% is saturated fat, then protein, and then carbohydrate. The brain, the most creative organ, the thing that separates us from the rest of evolution, the rest of the animals on the planet, is 50% saturated fat. Our nervous systems cannot function efficiently without saturated fats. It's rich in the crucial vitamins A, D, and K2, which most people living nowadays do not get enough of. And there's no need to supplement with those, with the exception of D, because we get it from sunlight typically. And most of us don't get enough sunlight, particularly in the northern hemisphere, in the UK where we are. We can only produce vitamin D from the sun in about 3 months of the year, if we're lucky. If you're experiencing the British summertime at the moment, you'll know that getting vitamin D in is not the easiest thing. The guys who live over in California, you're a lot luckier with that. Just an interesting stat from a bit of research that was produced is that consumers of margarine have twice the incidence of heart disease compared to butter eaters. Cholesterol, again, has been maligned by science. It actually helps boost our immunity to infectious diseases. It increases the strength of the intestinal wall, and it aids in the regulation of blood sugar and systemic inflammation. Systemic inflammation, from a nutritional perspective, is probably the greatest stressor on the system from the anti-nutrients that we're taking in the typically modern diet. And the liver produces around about 1,200 milligrams of cholesterol every day. If we eat more cholesterol in our foodstuffs, it will reduce fat. If we eat less, it will increase it. So whether you like it or not, there is going to be cholesterol floating around your system the whole time, and it's a very protective steroid. Some more research that was fascinating as I was writing the book is that older people with high cholesterol levels outlive those with low cholesterol levels in their blood. And people with low cholesterol are twice as likely to have a heart attack when compared with people with high cholesterol readings. It's kind of a reverse of what many of us have been taught over the years. Omega-6 and 3 are the polyunsaturated fats. Typically, we're getting in a lot of omega-6 and not enough omega-3. 6 comes from those oils I was mentioning to look to avoid, which are the vegetable, grain, and seed oils, oily fish, and meat raised on pasture. So beef, lamb, etc., raised on pasture provides us with omega-3. There are some of the problems, again, that's systemic inflammation, blood thickening, increased risk of chronic diseases, risk of cardiovascular disease. All of those are primarily attributable to an excess of omega-6. We need some omega-6 in our diet, but it needs to be in balance with the omega-3. And the simple way to do that is to eliminate vegetable, grain, and seed oils, artificial and man-made trans fats, which are in any prepackaged meals. They're always or likely to have those in, and excess carbohydrates. And then if you consume meat, pastured or organic eggs, and oily fish once or twice a week, you're going to be providing your body with, in all likelihood, a decent amount of omega-3. The one diet, do eat protein and fat. So that comes from the animal sources primarily, which are the meats. Anything is good in terms of meat. The better it's been raised and reared, the more organically it's been raised and reared, or at least free range, the better it is because of the profile of the fats in the meat. But if you're on a budget, the best options to stick with if you are on a budget and you can't afford organic and free range is to go with beef or lamb, because the fats in beef or lamb are not so affected by an unhealthy upbringing of the animal. Vegetables and salad, fine. Healthy fats we've talked about in a little bit more detail. And healthy snacks, if you're okay with lactose, if you're okay with dairy proteins, cheeses are fine. Whole full-fat cream, coconut milk, absolutely fine. Fruits in moderation. I'd say if you're looking to lose weight, hold your fruit consumption down to about 1 piece of fruit a day. If you're happy with your weight, that can go up 2-3 pieces a day. High-quality cured meats, continental sausages and cold sliced meats are beneficial snacks. Rather than having to go to that sandwich bar for lunchtime, you can grab some salami, something of that nature. And nuts are okay. Don't go overboard on them. But as a quick snack, a handful of nuts can be beneficial too. And to avoid grains, sugars and sweeteners, the unhealthy fats, any altered fat level product, so anything that's semi-skimmed, anything that's been tampered with and moved away from nature, I would say avoid. Fruit juices, they're just sugar water essentially. Junk food is an obvious one. Processed meat where it's been filled out with sugars or carbohydrates needs to be avoided as best you can. And high carbohydrate alcoholic drinks. Alcoholic drinks that work, red, white wine, and the spirits are far better, depending on the mixer you use with the spirits. If you can take this information away today and eat like this 80% of the time, you're going to put yourself in a really good place. And then allow yourself, if you need to, that freedom to have the indulgences on the night out. But if you eat right 80% of the time, your body, in all likelihood, so long as you're not dramatically metabolically damaged, will be able to cope with that intake of food. I'm going to skip over this section because we're running out of time. but there are 3 body types. You can't change your genetics. You can optimize your personal genetics. But building on that, there are certain traits within our DNA that can be turned up like a volume switch or turned down through correct exercise and nutrition. So you can, to a degree, affect a change. I'm going to move really briefly now in the last 2 or 3 minutes onto exercise. I'm a big proponent of high-intensity training. I know Anthony is as well, so I assume a lot of you guys have seen some of the videos that 21 Convention's already put up from Doug McGuff. I'd encourage you to read Body by Science by Doug McGuff as well. It's an excellent introduction to high-intensity training. You only need to exercise for 15 minutes once or twice a week to get everything that you can from exercise. And a really simple routine would consist of the pull down, so the upper back and the arms, leg press, hips, thighs, quads, hamstrings, adductors, calves, they're all getting hit there. Chest press, chest, deltoids, triceps. Row, it's a pulling movement through a horizontal plane rather than the pull down, which is through the vertical plane. And one more exercise, but I haven't got on here, the overhead press. That's essentially the big 5 routine. If you're looking to start off high intensity training, that's the routine I'd encourage you to start with. You're getting the biggest bang for your buck. You're covering all the essential muscle groups. And by doing a set that lasts between 60 seconds and 2 minutes and reaching fatigue in that time frame, you are doing everything you can to switch on the body's growth processes. Okay, I'm not going to go through the benefits now. If anybody wants to talk more about high-intensity training or Twitter me, I can get back to you with more information. Recreation is also important in addition to high-intensity training, so do things you enjoy. Be aware that every form of exercise has a risk-reward ratio. Just be acceptant if you're going to do something like skydiving of the dangers, or if you're going to do marathon running, be aware of the impact it's going to have on your joints over time. If you're okay with those risks and you enjoy it, carry on and do that stuff as well. Exercise in the brain stimulates, this is beyond the physical benefits of exercise, it stimulates the creation of new neurons, it protects existing neurons, promotes learning and memory, and reinforces neural connections. So beyond the physical, internally in our brain chemistry, exercise has a function as well. The outcomes from today's talk, I hope you've learned to improve your ability to cope with stress. Key point there is awareness. How to manage and improve your energy levels. Key point there is to eat a high-fat, moderate protein, and moderate to low-carb diet based on evolutionary principles. Keep yourself fit with high-intensity training first and foremost, and then enjoy your recreation time as well, and a greater understanding to care for yourself. Be aware of both your psychology and your physiology to get the most out of your life. And some recommended reading: Stress Management by myself and George Phillips, The One Diet, or for those who don't need all the science, The One Diet in a Nutshell, Body by Science, and the goal-setting book I mentioned earlier, Change Directions. Thank you. If you want to get in touch with me, there's my details. I'll be happy to field any questions now.
You mentioned being aware of breathing when you're kind of working and stressed. And I've kind of noticed that I do sometimes get shallow breathing in a particularly stressful situation, but it's very difficult to stay focused on that and continue to do something else. So how do you kind of keep that
So it needs to become an ingrained pattern first. So what I would encourage you to do is just to take some time. Ideally, if you know you're going to be going into a stressful situation whilst you're on the tube, in your car, or you're getting yourself walking to that meeting or whatever, is to focus on your breathing and focus on breathing deeply. By saturating the system with oxygen even before you've got there, it's going to encourage you to stay relaxed in that environment when it comes about. And by doing that repetitively, you're going to be developing that skill of breathing in that way, and ultimately it will become natural for you to do that even under stressful circumstances. So it's like build up that pattern. Anybody else? It's over here.
Hi, coming from a paleo diet for about a year now, I've recently seen some evidence that perhaps carbohydrates aren't so bad if they come from the right sources, particularly Stefan Guyen. I don't know if you've heard of him. So what's your options on that? Because I've reintroduced potatoes and sweet potatoes and have seen some benefits. So I was wondering what your opinion on that would be.
So for people who are not metabolically damaged, who haven't got metabolic issues with massive amounts of excess weight, I think that certain carbohydrates can be happily introduced into the diet. White rice, sweet potatoes, even regular white potatoes too, to a degree. And they can even make up quite a decent amount of your diet as well. They're very low to non-existent in anti-nutrients. So from that standpoint, they're fine for you. Particularly people who engage in a lot of physical activity, they're going to be beneficial for because they're providing more energy. So I have no problem and encourage people to use those who are not metabolically damaged, who don't have dramatic amounts of weight to lose. James.
Hey, I was going to ask you actually about a controversial topic, your ideas on the food reward stuff going around the paleo sphere at the moment. But instead, as you kind of touched on the more sort of recent ideas on reintroducing safe starches and things like that, would you be able to expand more on what you said about with regards to stress? And you said about change being a really big source of stress, changing people's lives. Could you expand more on some of the potential kind of physical and health consequences from change in someone's life and what that could have with regards to someone's health?
Yeah, anytime that you're putting an excess stress on the system is going to be damaging either psychologically or physiologically over time. There was a slide that I took out of today in minimizing this about acute and chronic stress. Acute stress is something that happens in the moment, whether it's physical and we get a cut to the arm, or whether it's psychological, a stressful situation we're posed with that's going to last 5 minutes. And the body can recover from those really well. What it doesn't recover well from is chronic stress that's ongoing. And that would be if you repeatedly damaged your arm or you were constantly felt under stress. And by the way, it doesn't matter whether that's real or imagined psychologically, both have the same impact on our system. And that slide that I put up that had all the sort of consequences of that, sort of the physical manifestations of that. What we are looking to avoid is being in a chronically stressed state on an ongoing basis. Short doses of acute stress can be beneficial for us, like high intensity training, for example. Does that answer your question? Okay. And we're there. So thanks for your time and attention, guys, and enjoy the rest of the conference.